I'm Shuly Babitz, and I am so excited to see so many of you joining us today, because if you're here, we share a common passion, the pursuit of good writing. Clear and concise writing helps everyone, from the most educated experts to beginners, and plain language makes information accessible. So if you're serving the public in any way, which most of us here are, right? You want them to be able to benefit from your information, your services, your products, whatever it is. And the public is only going to engage with your information if they understand it. And so I'm here today, along with Katy and everybody else, to help you make the case for plain language to anyone you work with. I've been in the government for 14 years. And so over that time, I've had many conversations about plain language and writing with a whole host of people in government, from scientists and public health experts and doctors and communications leaders. And what I can tell you is that making the case for plain language is equal parts amazing and frustrating. And Katy, I'm just going to ask you if you can start sharing our slides. Wonderful. So we're going to go start on slide 3. And on this slide, it sort of represents that sort of duality, complexity of the amazingness and frustratingness of plain language. So this image, when I was in college back in the 90s, which kind of dates me, these posters were in like 75% of college dorm rooms and off-campus apartments, but without that outline of the camel, just the sort of graphic mess. And if you stared at that graphic mess at just the right angle, with just the right amount of distance, you look right behind it, before it, around it, then what happened? Magically, you would see this 3D image of a camel or a dolphin or a hot air balloon just like pop out at you, right? You get this amazing clarity out of this big graphic mess, right? It's amazing. So when people would see that, they'd be like, whoa, I can see it. That's awesome. But those who couldn't see it, and there were plenty of us who could not see it, no matter how weirdly we were looking at it, were frustrated. Right. And so plain language is a lot like that. You can either sometimes see it or you can't see it. And our job as communicators is to draw this outline for everyone we work with so that no matter what, you can get that magic of plain language. You can see it. And how do we draw that outline for people? Right. OK, I'm going to give you the spoiler right now. If you take away one thing from my presentation today, this is it. How do you draw that outline? Build trust. All right, well, now we're going to get into what I mean by that. So let's move on to slide 4, where I've sort of set up what we're going to talk about today that's going to get us there. Okay, so first we're going to define what we mean by plain language. Then we're going to address some of the legislation that has come up from federal legislation on plain language and how that informs our conversation. Then we're going to address some common concerns and myths about plain language, which I'm sure a lot of you will find very familiar. And then we're going to get into the strategies for how we can make that case for plain language. And then I'm going to turn it over to Katy to discuss how all this applies to web content. So that's our roadmap. Now let's move to slide 5, where we're going to define what we mean when we say plain language. You see this little cartoon where you get this person putting into a big giant pot, this long, dense looking, very hard to read document. And then you have this woman saying, hey, if you use plain language and you put it into this pot, this is what it's going to boil down to. So essentially, when it comes down to it, writing in plain language means that you're sharing information that people can find, understand, and use. And to do that, you got to start out by asking some questions, right? Who is your audience? Do you want them to take an action, like get a COVID vaccine? Are you trying to convince them of something? Maybe that COVID vaccines are safe and good for you. What is the goal of your communication? And how are you going to measure that goal? So once you've answered these questions and you're ready to start writing, you can make your product understandable using plain language elements. And these are, we could do a whole presentation on each one of these bullets, and I'm just going to go through them pretty quickly. And I'm sure you're going to be hearing more about them over the course of time today. But let's go over the basics, right? Short sentences, paragraphs with bullet points, divided up by clear headings, active voice, where the subject of a sentence performs the verb's action, as opposed to passive voice, which is just a more subtler and weaker tone. Use everyday words, words that people all understand. No technical jargon or acronyms. No redundancy. And no meaningless words or phrases. So like I said, there's a lot more that we can say about this in getting into the details of writing in plain language, but the point is to sort of give this as a basic overview, and then we're going to sort of get into some other things. So now we're going to move to slide 6. And here, I want to emphasize that writing in plain language is mandated by the federal government by legislation. The Plain Language Act of 2010 and the 21st Century Idea Act, which that governs web content, whereas plain language of 2010 is more about writing in general. Now let's think for a minute about what happened just before 2010 that would have been the impetus for creating legislation to make our language clearer, right? Could it have been this little device, this rectangular device that is pink in my hand, that's all fit in my hand, that we check about 200 million times a day? Yeah, because before 2010, people were already used to reading content on their computer screens. And when I say reading, you know that I really mean scanning, right? We know from research and also from our own habits, most of us don't start at the top of a page, especially a web page, and read linearly straight down to the bottom, right? We scan to find the information that we need. So once our screens got smaller, that scanning process got even faster, right? So we have to recognize that our approach to taking in information has changed radically over the last 10 to 15 years, right? We've seen from blogs and Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, these are just getting shorter and faster. And so our approach to writing has got to evolve as well. And that's what these regulations are reminding us of and telling us that we need to get on it, right? And here we see this little person in this cartoon saying, I don't understand what's in this document here that's full of writing. And then you see that it's blocked. There's less language, there's some images, and then it's a little bit easier to understand. So she goes from to ah. Okay, now we're going to move to slide 7. And we're going to understand that while we know that our writing style needs to evolve, we also know that it's really hard to implement change. There are so many concerns and myths about simple and concise writing. And I'm sure many of you have heard, oh, plain language is unprofessional, or, readers expect official language from the government, right? Technical terms, that's what we live by. Those are our authoritative information, right? And the very famous, very commonly used, but this is how we've always done it, right? There is some kind of perception out there that complex writing is authoritative, that long words and long documents impress readers, and that plain language oversimplifies content and even insults intelligent readers. Now, as readers, don't we prefer to have shorter documents that get to the point? Who has time for clunky prose and jargon? I mean, especially in professional writing, we're busy at our jobs. We need to get in and get out and move on, right? So nevertheless, it seems like dense writing is the default writing setting for so many people. And what we're trying to do as communicators, because we're not so many people, we're communicators, right? We're trying to override that default setting. So here's some reasons why we're trying to do that, right? Jacob Nielsen is basically the grandfather of usability. And his guidelines are like the gold standard for effective writing and content design. His firm conducted the research that shows, without a doubt, highly educated professionals want content that is digestible, concise, and scannable. And this has been replicated again and again. Let me tell you a quick story. Not long ago, in 2017, a group of journalists started an online news service. And they based it on this concept they call smart brevity. I think they've even copyrighted it. That's their term, right? All articles that they publish are digestible, concise, and scannable. These articles are like 150 to 300 words long. They all have like the same essential structure. They have a catchy but meaningful headline. They have a few sentences of prose that use bullets whenever possible. And they have a sentence on why this matters. So over the past 5 years, the site has built an audience of over 10 million visitors a month, most of whom are like these high-level executives and experts who don't have a lot of time to read long articles. I say this not to be an advertisement for this particular news service, and you can find it online if you're interested, but to show you that this smart brevity concept really works. And you can use that as you make your own case. And so now we're going to move to slide 8, where we're really going to get into the heart of these strategies. So remember that what we want to do is build trust, right? Change can be hard, especially for those who are used to doing things in a certain way. And people often take editing on their writing really personally, right? It's not personal, but it can feel that way. So we need to be mindful of those sensitivities. They exist. And at the outset of every project, we want to frame plain language as an effective approach, which it is, rather than just editing for the sake of editing, which it is not, right? So why is it effective, right? Let's share why, share how, show the results, right? Why is it effective? Because it helps your audience understand the message the first time they read it or hear it. Because it ensures that people will read your document, understand what you're saying, and then take the action that you're recommending. Because rereading something wastes time, it builds frustration and it adds confusion. Because making our writing accessible widely, no matter what burdens or barriers people may face, is really, really important. And taking together all of these things allows us to better serve the public. And so these are all positive reasons that you can share with colleagues every time you work on a document. And when I say every time, I mean every single time. Even if you said it a million times before to the same group, I guarantee you're going to have to say it again. And that's okay, right? Consistent messaging helps manage everyone's expectations. They will come to know that plain language is your consistent approach. And that's when you begin to see a culture shift in favor of plain language. We have done that with our team at the Maternal and Child Health Bureau at HRSA. And we've seen those conversations really help us build trust, right? And building trust is the name of the game. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we were asked to edit what was called an infographic / fact sheet on some of our program's grantees. So what we were faced with was 5 pages of unclear, inconsistent, redundant information, which was neither an infographic nor a fact sheet. Now, if I had put it that way to the program team, they would have ended the meeting right then and there and gone to complain to my supervisors that I was criticizing them, right? Instead, I asked some questions. What are you trying to achieve with this product? Like, let's take a step back. Who is the audience? How are you trying to communicate with that audience? What's the best way that we can do that, right? And once we started talking it through, they realized that they didn't really need an infographic / fact sheet, which is great because that's not what they had. What they needed was a way for their grantees to learn about what other grantees were doing and kind of create a community where they could discuss ideas and share information. So what I did was I reformatted their infographic into a shorter, scannable set of emails that they could send directly to their audience, and they could measure how many of those emails were actually opened. I showed them an example, and I got their buy-in. Once they sent it out and they got the really great feedback, that's when I got their trust. So that's one example. Let's move to slide 9 and we'll see what another strategy is, right? So here we see a little picture of how people tend to write things, right? There are a whole huge amount of information that they want to say, right? But on the other side, we've got a little guys snoozing about all that stuff because they're only interested in a whole nother set of information. And what comes through in the middle of that cartoon is what's relevant to them, and it's just that much. And what we can do is we can drill down to that relevance with effective editing. Now, when you implement your editing really well and really consistently, again, that's how you're going to build the trust of your subject matter experts and your leadership. You have to apply the principles of plain language that we laid out really quickly earlier, and that I'm sure you're going to hear more about later today in other presentations. And I have found that even when someone is resistant to plain language at first, you can take a stab at editing their document and then walk them through your suggested changes. Go through it together. Once they see what you've done, they may have that aha moment of, oh, I see what you're trying to do. You're not changing my content. You're not changing the meaning of what I'm trying to say. You're just making it a little bit shorter. You're just making it a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier to understand, right? That aha moment, boom, that's trust. You built it. Okay, so we've just worked on a project where we had to edit documents that our programs had been using for a long time. Like there were some footnotes in there that were dated from 2011, okay? But HRSA leadership has now asked for these documents to be shorter and in plain language, right? Now, our programs were not really interested in editing documents that they had been using without a problem for years. And so what we had to do was sort of grease the wheels with what we did was we created a one-pager that asked programs to think about some basic questions, like what are the goals of your document? What are you trying to communicate? We helped them think about how to format the document so that shorter sentences were separated by clarifying headings. We emphasize eliminating redundancies, omitting all those needless words like in order to or therefore but, and avoiding technical jargon, right? We saw words like biopsychosocial and patient-specific barriers, and like, you just have no idea what they're talking about, right? So we worked with them to create those parameters. And it's so interesting because the end result of those edits, we kind of gave them the document, let them make the edits. The end result was so well received. One senior leader admitted that we had to bring them along to this process, kicking and screaming. But in the end, everyone was pleased with the progress. And there you go. We built trust. Okay, now we're going to move to slide 10. And then slide 10, we're going to get to even the more stubborn folks who really have even a harder time grasping sort of the subjectivity aspect of plain language, right? There's some people that are never going to be convinced unless you show them really hard data. So be prepared to do that. Like, for example, if you're working on an email blast, you can have two sets of options, one that's less plain language and one that's more plain language. Send them out to two separate groups of folks. Track the open rates and the link clicks. I think what you're going to find and what you're going to be able to show is that the plain language content got more opens, got more link clicks than the version that was less clear. And that's very hard data. Katie's going to talk more about this in her session because, in terms of tracking web page bounce rates and link clicks and entry points. But the idea is gather this kind of information and present it separately from an actual product. We have found that when we show our leadership this sort of objective data, it turns what seems like a subjective issue into a clear-cut objective fact, right? Some content is just better received than other content. And when folks who need that data are seeing it and they see it in black and white, that's how they're going to give you their trust. Okay, so slide 11 is my final piece of advice, which is know when to compromise, because you are going to have to compromise. There are so many complicating factors, and there are so many exceptions to being able to implement plain language in the ways that, as writers, we all want to feel that we can do. For example, there may not be a clearer way to say something like pediatric neurodevelopmental specialist, but that doesn't mean that you also need to say engage telephonic communication in order to utilize the services of pediatric neurodevelopmental specialists, right? My mantra always is that some plain language is better than no plain language. If you need to use a technical term like pediatric neurodevelopmental specialist, make the rest of your sentence as clear and as concise as possible. Choose your battles really wisely, because butting heads with your colleagues or your supervisors is not going to build trust, right? Being flexible this time around will build your credibility for the next time around, and there will always be another opportunity. So just taking a step back and realizing that the ultimate goal here in promoting the benefits of plain language is to find ways to build trust with the folks that you're working with. And the formula for that is be positive, don't be super critical. Be effective and consistent in your editing. Use data to show the results, and be ready to and able to compromise. Some plain language is better than no plain language. And so I'm so grateful to this group for giving us the opportunity to share what we've learned and our experiences. I really see this as a sort of we're all in this together kind of endeavor. And so I'm looking forward to your questions at the end. If we don't get to them, please feel free to reach out directly to me, to us, and I'm happy to answer and discuss any questions. And now what I'm going to do is turn the presentation over to Katy Karnell.
So thank you, Shuly, for that. That was fantastic. And I hope that in this second part of the session, can offer those who deal with website content a little bit more information and an example of how we try to progress those things. Let me share my screen again, and let's get to the, oops, hold on. We're going to get to the second part of our session. If it'll advance, here we go. So this second part of the session is about some lessons I've learned, strategies I use to build that credibility with leadership, with our subject matter experts, so that we can help those website visitors find what they seek and understand what they read. And when I speak about website plain language, I want to point out that I'm not just speaking about the written content, but I am speaking about the navigational structure and also the layout of that content on the page, because that can either hinder or facilitate your user getting what they need. So I just have like about three slides, and then I want to go to an example, and I want to leave time for questions. And so I want to just start with stating a little bit more about the problem when it comes to the website. And I want to point out probably what most of you already know, but I want to kind of describe, when we think about the website, presence that our agencies have. And ours is a bureau within the Department of Health and Human Services, basically that is dealing with maternal and child health. We want to make sure moms, kids, their families, that their health and well-being is optimized. And so we are a grant-making agency. That's our kind of our primary action. And so we have a very complex portfolio. And we want to make sure that when people come to the website, they can understand who we are, where we fit in that government puzzle. And to that end, there can be conflicting ideas and competing priorities, you know, as Shuly described. Our subject matter experts, sometimes they think more is more. They deal with the nuance, they deal with the details, because that is where the value is. They spend a lot of time and thoughtful effort in designing these projects and administering how they work. And so they aren't always in tune with how a website visitor might be coming to a website and what their needs are in this very busy world. We all forget, we all think our work is the most important. We want to communicate all of its value and don't realize other people are scanning. Other people are on mobile devices. Other people aren't coming to delve. They're coming to take a specific action. Oh, let me sign up for that webinar. Oh, you know, where is that project on the website? So there can be like different levels of buy-in, and you might find yourself kind of caught in the middle. I think we all feel caught in the middle. Even if you're in the front office, there's always an office above yours. There's always offices lateral, and a lot of coordination has to happen, and systems of clearance. How do we negotiate these best to progress content? And what I like to sometimes say is that it's kind of like there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen on website content. And yet you as the plain language professional, you as the person with expertise, you might be with a lot of other cooks who actually don't have that skill set. And so how do you negotiate that people signing off, or the subject matter experts, you know, who's owning things? How are these lines of authority, you know, hindering or promoting what you're doing? And so the question becomes, okay, how do we move toward solutions? And now I'm on slide 14. And I think that some of the keys toward moving towards solutions, and again, that solution is meeting the user's needs. What does the user need who comes to the website? It's important to recognize limitations and opportunities. You do want to leverage shared goals. And in our case, when we went about overhauling our website, the one thing we could all agree on was the website wasn't currently working. So use that. It doesn't work now. Let's try this. And you know what? We can try something new again if we put something up and it's not working. I heard time and again in our website overhaul, when you're finished with this overhaul, when you're finished. And you have to pivot back if you are a website person or doing content for the website. You're putting everything on a path, and you're continually going to be moving things forward. You're going to create a foundation, and you're going to then leverage that foundation to improve and improve and improve, because the work isn't done. We're not creating solutions for everything. We're not 100% correct. Mistakes are made. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so be pragmatic. And also, it's really important to establish with the teams, your internal teams that you're working with, you do have to agree on who that audience is and delineate audiences, who that primary audience is, the secondary audiences, why are people coming? And then opening up that, that vision so that people understand that even if our primary audience are maternal and child health professionals, our grantees, our potential grantees, we also want to make sure that someone who's coming to us for the first time Maybe a legislative office is looking at us. Maybe a family advocate is looking at us, that when they come, they can still find what they're looking for and they can understand it. So one of the things that help us move towards solutions is, at least in my agency, people are really big on what we call the evidence base, that we use science and research to inform how we design this work, how we fund things, how we administer the work. Well, we in the communication side of the equation also use research. And so I find that if you use the research, you use the metrics, you use the best practices, and you admit to the limitations. Look, there's no magic bullet here, but this is what we know. And this is what the last several years of research told us about how PDFs are used. This is what the research tells us about mobile devices. Then you get on that even footing with them to collaborate much better, because they recognize that you're not making arbitrary decisions. So, and then the key in all of this, from my perspective, is that you can't really understate how important it is to have a sincere and genuine interest in and effort to understanding your agency's content. Our agency has a really complex portfolio. There's a lot of depth to it. It's all about filling gaps. There's a lot of complexity. The laws that underpin the work that we do. The more that I could understand the content itself, recognizing I won't be the expert the way the epidemiologist is, or the way the public health analyst is that expert. But if I show them that genuine interest, then they are going to trust me when I say, look, I really think that isn't an understandable way to write that. Could we try this? So all that being said, I'm moving to slide 15. I want to show you just an example on the website, but due to time, and I'm going to go to example 2 and show you kind of a before and after with our website and how I worked to build some authority, in a sense, and that trust, so that I can progress content on behalf of my colleagues without getting too bogged down in review processes and clearance processes. And the idea being that small successes can open the door for future work. So this is our page from our old website. And you'll notice at the top, we have a section for topics and a section for programs and initiatives. That caused confusion. How are you grouping items on your website? How do you navigate? And when you come to a list of programs and initiatives, there was this very, very long running list where items could be found in multiple groupings. And it became a very long list, and there was nothing actionable on any of these items. The items also might be found in different places on our website, written just slightly differently. And then up here at the top, you see there's a view A to Z listing of our programs and initiatives, of our projects. Well, view an A to Z listing to me suggests that that will be a comprehensive list. But when we go to that page was a shorter list and had 75% redundancy with the first list. And if you can imagine all the different cooks in the kitchen on all these different projects, how do you negotiate getting this to the next level? And what I would say is basically you want to give yourself time. and take those smaller steps. You've established the audiences, you've established the goals, you've talked about the research, you've overhauled some other part and they see it's working. And so then when you come to this, a more complex part of your site, and you really do need to streamline, otherwise it's not going to progress. I took a chance finally. I took a chance and I said, let me rewrite. And let me rewrite and let me organize all into a single way of presenting the work. And on our new website, we have one list, and the list involves a single sentence. And I wrote these sentences or these phrases to summarize. And what was interesting was that we took a chance, and maybe someone would feel that there was a problem with the way we wrote it. In fact, we have like 90 different projects, investments. No one came back and had an issue with it. And maybe part of that is because we set the stage to let people know, hey, it's a work in progress. If you find a problem, we can always make a change. We can always improve. And so that helped, that helped progress the work. And that I just want to point out that when I took a chance, what I mean is that at some point you have to decide, this is your niche, this is your expertise, you do have some authority. And that isn't meaning you're taking a shortcut. It means that you're acting in good faith and you're acting with integrity, and you have invested the time to understand the work and develop the relationships. And when you've done those things, then perhaps you carry it forward by just getting something done. And when you get something done, people see an improvement. And when they see an improvement, they're going to give you more leeway next time to carry another page forward.